Welcome to the Tepper School of Business Multimedia Series. For more information on the Tepper School at Carnegie Mellon, please visit us at www.tepper.cmu.edu/multimedia. And now, here's your selected video.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Jertez Hunter, and I'm the president of the Organizational Leadership Club. Today, I have the honor of introducing our guest speaker. He is the president and chief executive officer of Mine Safety Appliances and one of Carnegie Mellon's own, Mr. Bill Lambert. Mine Safety Appliances has a broad product line from everything from hearing and eye protection to gas detectors, thermal imaging devices, as well as breathing apparatuses. Now, one of the products that I am intimately familiar with is the Advanced Combat Helmet, or ACH, which I wore while deployed to Iraq as a member of the United States Army. As the Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Lambert oversees the company's business through its three primary business segments, MSA North America, MSA Europe, and MSA International. Now, throughout his time at MSA, Mr. Lambert has worked in a variety of roles. He entered MSA in 1981 as a product engineer. And then he's worked as a project engineer. He's worked as a nuclear industry specialist. He has had increasing levels of responsibility as he moved into general management roles for the largest division in MSA, chief operating officer, and to his current role as the chief executive officer. Now, in addition to being a lifelong leader, Mr. Bill Lambert is also an innovator, and one of his notable achievements is receiving a patent for a breathing apparatus, the quick fill apparatus, which helps firefighters replenish the air supply in emergency and routine situations. So, please join me in welcoming Mr. Bill Lambert.
Well, it's great to be back here at CMU and at the Tepper School. As you heard, I was here back in the 1987-1990 time period, back when it was the Graduate School of Industrial Administration. And some of you in this room I know were also here at that time. Right, Bob? It's just great to see what's happening at this campus and at this school. And I'm just pleased to be a part of it. I'm pleased that you guys asked me to come and just talk to you a little bit about my story and what I've done here with my career at MSA. So, what I thought I would do is just talk to you a little bit about MSA, what we do at MSA, and the kind of company that I have the privilege of leading, and what are the things that are important to me. But I thought I'd talk to you a little bit about some of the struggles that we had at MSA and that I have had in particular, and this whole idea and the importance of focusing on the core, the real value creators at MSA or in your company when you get into that leadership position. Trying to find those is elusive. Everybody has a very, very strong opinion, but you've got to somehow separate the wheat from the chaff and make that decision of what it is that's going to create value for shareholders, create value for all the stakeholders as you move forward. So let's begin with me just telling you a little bit about MSA and who we are. You might know some of this. Some of you may. Some of you may not. But MSA is the world's largest producer of hard hats. Kind of low-tech stuff, hard hats. But we're the world's largest producer of hard hats in countries all around the world. Last year, we sold more than 10 million hard hats, and we protect more heads. We like to view it. We protect more heads than anybody else in the world, and that's just the hard hats. We talked about the Advanced Combat Helmet, but also firefighter helmets. We're the world's largest provider of firefighter helmets as well. But at MSA, we want to be more than just a hard hat producer, because what we try to do and what I try to inspire our people to think about is the fact that it's not just about making that hard hat. It's about the person who's wearing that hard hat, who's depending on that hard hat. that construction worker who, when that bolt drops on his head or when that blade breaks and something comes towards his eye, you know, there's more to it. Every life has a purpose. And that's our theme at MSA, is how do we improve those lives? We're also number one in fixed gas and flame detection instruments. These are much higher technology products, things like open path infrared detectors that over 300 meters shooting an infrared beam can detect whether there's a gas leak, a combustible gas leak, or whether there is a flame actually on an offshore oil platform or in a plant environment. And then take this fixed gas and flame detection and now put that on a worker, on a utility worker. And we're the world's largest provider of portable gas detection instruments. Some of the ones that are shown here be clipped to a worker's belt, maybe twice the size of a BlackBerry, and constantly monitoring the environment for toxic gases and oxygen concentrations. But again, you know, it's more than just that. It's about the workers, the people behind it, that we really are trying to influence and trying to protect. And that's what we're trying to inspire our people to constantly keep in mind. We're the number one provider of self-contained breathing apparatus in the world and fire helmets. 7 out of 10 firefighters that you see anywhere in the world are going to be wearing an MSA fire helmet, which is kind of interesting because when you look at the differences in styles around the world, whether it be a jet-style fighter helmet that you see on European firefighters, or whether you see the very traditional helmets that you see in the Fire Department of New York City, or whether you see a fire helmet that's like a mix between the two that's shown here. You know, that's very important to us that we're protecting those people. But again, we're more than that. And so as Anthony shows here, you know, every one of those firefighters has a family that they want to go home to at the end of the night. And so what we try to strive to talk to our people about is that we are the ones that are there on probably that worst day of that worker's life. When that bolt drops from high above onto their head, or when that firefighter is in a building that's completely occluded with smoke and he can't see and he's running out of air, you know, that's what we're about. And that's what we strive to inspire our people to be engaged with this company, because we're about protecting lives. We're about protecting the life and health of workers everywhere around the world. So I've got a short video here I'd like to show you. It's a bit of a commercial, but I think it shows more specifically the applications of some of our products, and I wanted to share that with you. So let me run that video. Yeah, so I think in that video then you can see some of the applications and where we are and where you'll find MSA. Just a snapshot, a little bit more here, a snapshot. MSA is the only U.S. publicly traded company dedicated to safety. There's no other company exactly like us. A lot of people might say that, but really in our case, there have been companies like us, but they've been acquired by lots of other bigger companies. We're the only ones that are still publicly traded, but dedicated solely to protecting life and health. This year, we'll be 98 years old. Founded here in Pittsburgh, actually in downtown Pittsburgh, by two Bureau of Mines engineers who worked just across campus at the Bureau of Mines building not far from here. So there's a lot of connections to this geographic area for our company and who we are. But today, as I said, we're a global leader around the world in a variety of industries. The oil and gas market, the construction market, the military, firefighting. And just to give you some stats on who we are, we've got 11 locations in 8 different countries where we're actually manufacturing product. We have sales offices in 42 countries around the world, 5,300 employees on a global basis. Last year, our sales were about $1.2 billion. This year will be a bit better than that. And our market cap is around $1.5 billion now. So it's a great privilege for me to have this position of the CEO for this multinational, mid-sized company that I do, and to just constantly stress to our folks that every life has a purpose. And it's not just about us making hard hats or breathing apparatus or fixed gas and flame detection instruments or fall protection, but it's that life that we're trying to protect and inspiring our people to design, develop, sell, and market those products, the best possible products that we can, to save those people or protect those people on probably the worst day of their life. The end markets that we're going to, core industrial markets, are shown there on the left side of the screen, and I'll dig into this in a little bit. First responders and military. Those are the biggest markets that we have. And just narrowing our focus to markets is an important lesson. It's an important lesson as you get into business, because my message today will be about when you extend the core, some of the risks of extending your product line, extending your markets that you go to, has a lot of risk, has some value destruction risk for the company. And I'll give you a good example a little bit later. In industrial safety, this is what you'll see in industrial safety for MSA. Some of the core industrial areas, things like breathing apparatus and hearing protection and instrumentation that you see and fall protection, all throughout this, to permanently installed flame detectors that would detect if in fact a flame does erupt at a compressor station. I don't know if any of you realize it, but very recently here, just last month, we had, with the Marcellus Shale and all the activity around Marcellus Shale, at one of the compressor stations, a fire broke out, and they couldn't get that fire out. The firefighters couldn't get that out. That particular compressor station didn't have any flame detection equipment. Yet there's lots of other places around the country where those same kinds of fires break out, and flame detectors, MSA flame detectors, built into the safety system, shut everything down, and it suppresses the fire. So those are the kinds of things that we're trying to do in core industrial. This is our biggest market. 66% of our sales last year, about $793 million, went to the core industrial market. And people say, safety is just not very sexy. I mean, it's just, right? I mean, I can see it on your faces. You guys don't think safety's sexy. But it is. And it's the inspiration of protecting people. The growth drivers that we see in this marketplace actually date all the way back to when John Ryan and George Dyke, and they had their little canary that was in a cage, and it was trying to let the miners know when there was high levels of carbon monoxide, right? Because the canary was much more sensitive to those gases, to that and combustible gases, than a human being was. But what they knew back then was that safety is equal to or enhances productivity. And it's been proven time and time again. And so as we see the industrial segments around the world growing, we see one of the primary drivers is because safety is equal to productivity. Organizations can be better when there's a safe work environment. The awareness of worker safety is increasing dramatically, even more dramatically outside of the United States than inside the United States. You know, prior to 1972, which sounds like a long time ago to some of you, but it really doesn't to some of us. Prior to 1972, we didn't have an Occupational Safety and Health Administration in the United States. We didn't have laws that required protecting workers. And so after that time, you've seen our laws improve. You've seen Western Europe improve. And now you've seen the rest of the world kind of catch on to that and be inspired by the fact that safety is productivity, but also our regulations need to change so that we can improve our workplaces and our people and protect them. Energy demands growing increasingly. Extraction areas in particular are very dangerous, whether it be oil and gas, whether it be mining for minerals, or whether it be mining for fuel. Those are very dangerous environments, and so that's where we see a lot of strength coming from as well for MSA and a lot of growth. So you'll see a lot of what we do driving towards the industrial markets. First responders, I said we're a market leader in first responders, and we are. Breathing apparatus and fire helmets around the world. And you'll see some of the other products that we manufacture here. You'll see the Hong Kong Fire Department here using that jet-style firefighter's helmet that I talked about, and using our thermal imaging infrared cameras for rescue missions that they have there. So the fire service is important to us. Makes up about 25% of who we are. And the growth drivers here are more about technologies. How do we better protect firefighters? We've got one project that we're working on that CMU has a hand in on trying to find out where is a firefighter when a firefighter gets lost and in a building. So how do you locate a firefighter when there's no longer a GPS signal? We all get so used to the fact that we have our cell phones, and no matter where we are, we can just plug in and we have a signal connection, a satellite connection, and we know exactly where we are, right? Well, it doesn't work when you're all the way downstairs or you're in a structure. Firefighter location is really important. That advancing technology is going further and faster. And we've done a lot in that area, and you'll see us do more as we introduce products late this year for firefighter location. The third area that we have is military. We touched on very briefly there. Whether selling breathing apparatus to the United States Air Force, we're the sole provider of breathing apparatus for the U.S. Air Force around the world. And that's not insignificant. You know, that's close to 100,000 firefighters around the world that need to be protected at U.S. air bases. And some of the other products that we make there. But that's becoming a less and less part of our business. The drivers there are no surprise to you. Global conflict and capability and advancing technology. So, you know, that gives you a sense of where we are and where we've been. But this all goes back to this passion of safety that I talked about. Whether it was Thomas Edison working with our founders, the founders of the company back in 1914 for a miner's electric cap lamp. This is kind of interesting, I think, because when we walk through the halls of MSA, we have a display area set up that shows kind of the progression of our products and the progression of our company. And we have this one area that shows miners' cap lamps from back around this time period, back in the 1914-15 period of time. Now, here's a miner that needs oxygen underground. Here's a miner that has a very dangerous environment with a lot of methane gas that comes out of the coal as well. And the type of lamp that they have on their head is what? It's a flame. So you've got oxygen because you have to breathe. You've got all this fuel and methane, and you have this flame on your cap. You know, is it any surprise that we had so many miners that got killed? And so Thomas Edison was inspired by the fact that he said, you know, we could do this differently with an incandescent lamp and a battery. And so he and our founders founded the company. And so from that early beginning, we've really extended MSA. A previous CEO said, anywhere you found danger, he wanted you to be able to find MSA. And that sounds good, but the risk is that you overextend. And so when I became CEO in 2008, part of the difficulty we had is that we had overextended. We were in too many areas, quite honestly. Some areas creating value and some areas not creating value. And so here's an example of what I thought was brilliant, because this was my idea. And I've had to swallow hard and take a big step back. But here's the rationale behind extending the core. So we're a leader in breathing apparatus for the fire service. We have SCBA leadership. We have these deep end-user relationships. Lots of the people that are in the development area are actual firefighters, or they've been trained by firefighters. This is around the world. And we've got deep, committed channels of distribution. We knew the fire service, and I'm just transporting you back about 10 or 15 years. And we also had this deep understanding in industrial hard hats. And again, doesn't sound sexy, but there's actually a lot of science that goes into providing head protection for workers, whether those workers be industrial workers or whether those, as you get into different types of impact, be in other businesses. So fire service, great leadership and channels of distribution, lots of good impact technology, material science. What's a natural extension there? Fire helmets. See, we weren't in fire helmets prior to 2000. In fact, we had tried to get into fire helmets back in the very early, or in the mid-1980s, and it was a complete disaster for us, for MSA. And I wrote a paper on it here at CMU for one of my classes. And I think I still have that paper, but it talked about kind of the lessons learned of why we were unsuccessful entering the fire service market. So in 2000, we went out and figured we'll acquire the market-leading brand. And so we did. We acquired the market-leading brand in North America, and then in 2002 followed that up with acquiring the market-leading brand for Europe. So that's why today 7 out of 10 firefighters you see around the world have MSA head protection on. Brilliant. I mean, that has been successful. So then we went a little bit further and we said, you know, if we know head protection that well, and we have these great channels of distribution, I told you we're the leader, the sole supplier to the Air Force, whether it be the gas masks or whether it be breathing apparatus. You know, we've got good channels of distribution, great contacts. We know a lot about head protection. Let's get into ballistic helmets. So we've extended from the core just a little bit further. Now we're into ballistic helmets, the advanced combat helmet that I know some of you in here have military background, you probably used. We were the sole supplier back in 2000 and I guess 2004 is when we first went into Afghanistan. No, 2001 we went into Afghanistan. It was 2003 we went into Iraq. And it was in 2004 that the advanced combat helmet that we had developed was just overwhelmingly accepted and became the standard of issue for all of our soldiers. Brilliant. It was a brilliant move again, extending the core. And if we could do ballistic helmets, then we ought to be able to do ballistic body armor, because now we know impacts with the head, we know how that advances, we know now ballistic impacts to the head with our advanced combat helmet. We could get into ballistic body armor, and so we acquired a company in 2006 to get into ballistic body armor. So this extension of rationale just makes perfect sense, except that the further and further you get away from the core, the less and less you're really good at what you do. That's my belief, and we've proven it here. If I were to take a look, when I became CEO and we started a competitive strategy session, we were working with an outside consultant, and we brought lots of tools to the table to figure out where do we make money and where don't we? Where have we extended too far, and where do we need to retrench, or what do we need to do? And so this is one of the outputs from one of the tools that we used. So you guys are all familiar with economic value add and looking at what is the pre-tax profit provided by our product lines. And to protect the innocent here, I've eliminated all the names, and I've just called them product line A through Q. And then we had a whole bunch of little stuff here that we refer to as peripherals, you know, way on the very end. And what you see when you look at this product line extension was that you have a whole lot of products that are adding value to MSA, providing economic value creation for MSA. And then in the same vein, you have a whole lot of product lines that are destroying value, that you're spending an incredible amount of time on in meetings and talking about issues, and even taking certain capital and allocating capital to those. And at the end of the day, MSA ends up with just about the same amount of value creation. Look at our 10K, you do the EVA, and MSA as a company creates about the same value as that one product line. So couldn't we just stop doing all the madness in between and just focus on that one product line? Now that was said, I said that in jest, and it was argumentative, but there's a lot of truth behind it. You know, how do you figure out, how do you get the organization behind the idea that says, there are a lot of interesting things that are happening over here, but they're just not creating value for MSA or for our shareholders. And we have to somehow rein it in, cut some of these out, rein it in, and really determine what are the core areas that are going to drive value creation going forward. And so that was probably the central theme to as I became CEO in 2008, is how do we focus on the core value creators for MSA? What were going to be the core drivers going forward? So the core drivers for us, this is a map that we like to use, but core for us are these product lines that I show up here. I've already talked to you about them in the introductory part, but self-contained, I wasn't going to talk to you about the stuff that is periphery, right? I was going to talk to you about the core stuff. Core for us is SCBA and supplied air, what we call supplied air respirators, industrial head protection and the accessories that support those or that can be supported by those, portable instrumentation and sensors, and advancing that and kind of bridging from the portable instruments and sensors as fixed gas and flame detection instruments, and then lastly, fall protection. These are the big drivers of profitability and value creation for MSA. These then now get disproportionate amount of resource allocation to them. This is where we make the investments. You know, making this step from anywhere there's danger, MSA should be present, to we're going to focus on the core was a big step for the company to take. We have some adjacent supporting product lines that are connected, supporting. They don't get as much resource allocation, but on the other hand, they're not so far from the core that it doesn't make sense for us to be in it. So that's why you see in here eye, face, hearing protection, fire helmets, and ballistic helmets. You know, those are still adjacencies to us, but they're not part of the core. They're not creating the real value. So we have to be careful how much we want to invest or how much we want to chase certain opportunities there. And then peripherals, ballistic vests, first aid, fire protection equipment, hand, arm, face, skin protection. You know, we're too far. That's a lot of that stuff you saw on the right hand of that waterfall chart. And so making those decisions to begin to call that back became part of my mantra over these last couple of years. When we set the corporate strategy in place, there were three imperatives to it. One was grow the profitable core of MSA. We identify it and we decide these are the initiatives behind growing that profitable core. Two, it was investing in and focusing on emerging markets. I'm not talking about that here today, but a separate element of our strategy was what are the markets that are really growing? Where are the opportunities for MSA? North America's opportunities are somewhat limited, but there are real opportunities in Latin America, in the former CIS countries, in Russia, in China, certainly. And so how do we invest? What's the right investments for us to be making in Sao Paulo as we grow this business and focus on the core? And then the last leg was we're in lots of countries. We have this really big footprint, and we need to call that back as well. There are certain locations and plants, so it was about operational excellence, and that's what we set up. Growing the core was about those products I've already talked to you about. These were the emerging markets and the high potential industries: oil, gas, petrochem, mining, construction, and fire service. Fast-growing geographies, I said, Brazil, Latin America, China, Russia, CIS, Middle East, and Southeast Asia. This is where we've now taken the organization and kind of moved it all in this direction to say these are the areas that we're talking about. These are the areas we're providing a lot of investment to. Lastly was with regard to operational excellence, and I could probably use a number of you to help us in some of this because you probably do that really well. In fact, we had two teams from CMU that helped us in some of the analysis that we were doing in operational excellence. But setting up new capabilities in certain areas, shutting down other capabilities, and a real focus was on Europe. So that was, I became CEO in 2008. It was a great time. We went through this strategy exercise with the Monitor Group. That's a consulting company out of Cambridge, Massachusetts that we used to help us. And they did a terrific job. We put this very articulate, brilliant strategy together. And so what was now required to implement that? Well, I'll tell you what, at first hurt was what happened in 2008, 2009. I think the worst global economic recession, certainly in my lifetime, and in lots of people's lifetime. I mean, 7.2 million jobs were lost in a fairly short period of time from the U.S. economy. We put equipment on people that are working. You know, the equipment that we manufacture, we're not putting that in a storage closet somewhere. We're protecting workers at work. And so with this downturn in the economy, all of a sudden, our attention and our decision as an executive leadership team was, what do we do? Do we abandon this strategy of focusing on the core, of investing in emerging markets, of operational excellence, and do we just kind of hunker down and weather the storm and do everything we can possibly do to survive? And that's where, as a leader, you have to have bifocals, and you have to be able to see not only what are the actions we have to take short term, but what is it that's best for us longer term. And so we stayed true to our strategy. Sure, we cut back. I took a 20% pay cut during that time period. And I asked the executive leaders that reported to me to take a 10% pay cut. And the people that reported to them would take a 5%. But the folks in the factory, they got a pay raise. And everybody else got a pay raise. But there are certain things that you have to do to decide, here's what we're going to do to weather the storm, and these are the things that we're not going to disrupt. We're going to stay this course. And so that was probably the hardest thing. So at first, you know, I couldn't believe it. I went to the former CEO, and I said, John, I said, in May of 2008, I felt like we were at an amusement park, and we were on this roller coaster together, and we were climbing to the very top, and just when the roller coaster gets to the top, you say, Bill, congratulations, take over. You got off, I'm in the lead car, and it's just, you know, hang on. And it really felt that way for a while. But the good news is we had a leadership team around us, and we had a board of directors that was very, very committed to our long term and what's in it for the long term. We didn't lose money during that downturn, but boy, our profitability was impacted greatly. That was 2009. 2010, when things started to flatten out and improve, and I sensed that there was going to be an improvement, you know, that's when the leadership team has to come together and say, do we just continue to ride this thing out, or do we add resources? Do we add investments, even if our earnings are going to be lower? And so the plan we put together for 2010 actually showed lower earnings than what we had in 2009. And I remember presenting to the board late in 2009 the 2010 profit plan, and they said, what are you, crazy? Crazy? We just had this really bad downturn, and you're going to have less earnings in 2010? And the argument was that we needed to make investments. We needed to grow the core. We needed to build ourselves up in these emerging markets if we're really to be strong going forward. So that's what we did, and they bought into it. And I'll show you at least one initial result, early initial result with the 2011 results in just a little bit here. So what were some of the things that we then had to use to do this, to make this strategy work? And so I just thought I'd highlight our lessons and what worked for us. One was focus and communication. You know, when you've got an organization, and I don't have a large organization, but 5,300 is a lot of people to me. And in that many countries around the world, we have 14 different languages in our organization. And communicating that strategy, getting the organization focused and communicating that was a big challenge. And I'll tell you, it's relentless communication. It's saying the same thing over and over and over and over and getting energized before you say it every time. That's hard. That was hard for me. But that was one of the lessons learned here, is that you had to focus the organization, you had to communicate relentlessly. What's your message? And how does everybody get that message? How do we translate that so that they understand it? Part of what helped us was having this emphasis on mission, vision, and values. I gave you, or some of you in here have a copy of our values booklet. You know, that became kind of a guiding, foundational element for us. We had values. We're an old company, but they weren't really articulated. There weren't examples given. And so what we tried to do in our values booklet is talk about, these are the 7 core values we have as a company. They're unchanged, really. There was nothing here that came out of left field for people. But it was, this is what we build on. This is who we are. This is how we act. This is how we expect you to act at MSA. And that became very helpful for us. Our willingness to take the long view in everything that we do became a bit of the mantra as well. That's why it was okay in 2010 for earnings to be lower than they were in 2009, because we were investing for the future. I had a board that supported that, and fortunately I had shareholders that bought into the message as well. And so as I explained that to investors, they got it. They understood what we were trying to do. But having this relentless communication on mission, vision, values, that became foundational to the message that we were trying to send. Secondly was having a rich supply of decision analytics that would support our decisions, our investment decisions. Lots of different tools. We set up an entire group. We restructured our finance and accounting group so that we would then have what we call a decision support group, using decision analytics to help guide the business decisions, to help test our assumptions on where do we create value and where aren't we creating value. And if you start to get people's heads around, these are the things that we're really looking for, you know, it doesn't take very long before everybody understands, okay, yeah, that's not a good area for us to be in. I won't say it was a bad area. It's not a good area for us to be in. So this became important for us, to have the right decision analytics. And then lastly, I'll say, was role clarity. Role clarity, not just organizationally. How do we set up the company organizationally? And I changed the structure of the company in 2008 when I became CEO. But then how do we also have better role clarity for those core product areas, those adjacent product areas, and those peripheries? Because everybody, like me, when I had a brilliant idea to go from breathing apparatus and industrial helmets into fire helmets, and fire helmets into ballistic helmets, and ballistic helmets into ballistic body armor, those are all really brilliant ideas. And when our guys in South Africa have similar brilliant ideas and why we should be in this hand cream, I have to be able to pull them back and say, no, that might be that might have certain elements of brilliance to it, but you know, this is what we're about. This is where we're headed. This is our core. So role clarity became another important point. And then lastly, a lesson learned here was learn when to stop fixing. As a mechanical engineer, and some of you in here are engineers, I'll tell you that engineers just love to continue to tinker. And I probably do that too much in engineering. And I constantly try to adjust and make it better, or make this product line better, or make this part of the business better. Well, you know what I learned when that economic downturn came, and as we're restructuring the company, it was about learn when to stop fixing. You know, it's not going to get any better, or you know as much as you're going to know. Now move on. The other thing was I'll group as what we call value realization efforts. We need to find ways to create value, and in our case, it was determining which plants were not effective and where did we need to be building our new plants. And so it was about value creation in our new plants and new locations. So we built a new plant in Querétaro, Mexico. We built a new plant and R&D center in Suzhou, China. And we completely remodeled and expanded our Sao Paulo operations in Brazil. These were about those parts of our business that were going to grow and are continuing to grow in the future. So that's where the investments needed to go, and we had to get kind of the student body behind that and these kind of investments. And that plant in Englewood, Colorado, you know, that would not get the investments. In fact, we'd have to pare that plant down and relocate most of that to Querétaro, Mexico. And then lastly was, I'll just tell you to really test your assumptions. Using the decision analytics that you have, really test the assumptions behind business, especially underperforming segments and some of the ideas. Ballistic vests, ballistic body armor was not a good decision. I say that now. after we spent almost $40 million entering the market and then probably chased another $30 to $40 million behind that as we had that business. That was wrong. We extended too far. We didn't understand it. I think we were caught up in the fact that you had this war effort going on and there were a lot of ballistic body armor vests being sold, and that we could do that and take it globally through our channels of distribution. And the fact of the matter was we couldn't. So it was a bad decision. So testing assumptions becomes really important, and making hard decisions that says we've done enough, stop fixing, get out. And so we did. Last December we sold it. So how are we doing? I'll just tell you we're off to a pretty solid start, I think. This is our 2011 financial results. Again, we set the strategy in 2008, made some changes in 2009, began to implement and invest in 2010. 2011, our sales were about $1.2 billion. That was up 20% from 2010. Our gross profit margins, 40%, up 200 basis points. Operating expenses were down 100 basis points. Our operating margin then increased 300 bips, and our earnings per share was up 80%. So, you know, it's a short time period, but I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about, you know, what I've struggled with as being a CEO. I could talk for a long, long time about some of the things that we struggled with and decisions we had to make. But I just wanted to tell you that for MSA, it was really important for us to focus on the core of where we create value and to put tools in place to help us understand that, and then to get the kind of results that we need to get. And so I think we're off to a solid start. I'm not declaring victory yet. We've got a long way to go in this race, but we're off to a solid start, and that's a good thing. So I also thought I'd tell you a little bit about how I think Tepper shaped me. And for that, I better take a drink of water. Because unquestionably, this school is shaping every one of you. I said it to a small group earlier this morning. I don't know if you feel it. I don't know if you sense it, but you're all changing. Absolutely. You're maturing. You're learning a lot more about yourself, and you're becoming a leader in a way that maybe you do sense it or don't sense it, but it's happening. It's absolutely transforming you. And I think that that's because of the rigor, what I like to refer to as, in my life anyway, the crucible. You know, where under heat and pressure, metal is formed. And the metal that's being formed in all of you, I think formed in me at that time period. And it changed me. It changed me dramatically from being an R&D guy to being somebody who not only believes in himself, but has the toolkit to address some of these very difficult business problems going forward. This is probably the one and maybe even most important area that it changed me, and how Tepper, or the GSIA at the time, how it affected me, because it did transform me. And I will argue that every one of you are being transformed. You probably feel it, but if you don't feel it because you're on such an accelerated pace here over 2 years, you know, maybe because I was in the flex time program, it was over 3 years, and I had a full-time job during the day, that I could see it, and others could see it in me as I changed in this program. But I think that the rigor here is a good thing. I hope you agree. But I think the rigor and the crucible that you're going through right now in your life is a good thing, and it's transforming you in a good way. Secondly, I think that that teamwork is a big impact here. It impacts you in ways that are going to be really important for you as you advance in your career. Intellectually, you guys are all stellar. Intellectually, the people that you're going to be working with, or maybe viewing as a peer that you're trying to get a promotion, maybe ahead of them or faster than them, intellectually you get it. Your issue is not intellectually. Your issue is going to be the emotional intelligence that goes behind it. How well do you work in a team environment? How well can you trust what the team is providing you, and how well can you then understand how you're impacting people. Your message impacts people. So how good are your antennas to catch that feedback as it's coming back? That's really important. And the friendships that develop here and the teamwork that you're experiencing here are shaping you in a good way, hopefully in a good way. Hopefully you're taking great advantage of that and working in a team environment. Thirdly, I think that communication skills. Millie, I can't remember Millie's last name. Myers. Millie Myers was my professor in communications. And do you still have communications as a part of your curriculum? You got to get in front of the camera and all that. Yeah, Millie was relentless on us, but she was really great in that sense because, as I said, the emotional intelligence component, how you communicate to others, how authentic you're perceived is important. I hope you perceive me to be authentic because that's important to me, and it will be very important to you. And so you can hone that skill here at Tepper, and I think it helped me dramatically. Again, from an R&D guy who just liked to sit in his cubicle or in his lab area to taking on greater and greater responsibilities each step of my career. That was important. Lastly, expanding my horizons. The diversity and the opportunity for diversity you have here at this campus, whether it be technologies, ideas, cultural backgrounds, experiences, it's just wonderful. So use it to your advantage every way you can. Expand yourself, push yourself into an uncomfortable zone maybe. That's really important. And that's what I tried to do, and I think it was very helpful to me. So thank you very much. That's all I had. I was going to open it up for Q&A. This is a picture at the New York Stock Exchange. This is actually during the closing bell. I think I was closing trading that day. And you know the opening bell, have any of you been at the New York Stock Exchange and had an experience like this or been up on the balcony? I'll give you a kind of a behind-the-scenes look. Couple of things. Number one, the balcony looks big. It's not. It's like really, really tiny, and everybody's crammed in there. Secondly, when we rang the bell once for opening trading one day, and then this I think was closing day, closing of trading when I got to pound the gavel. And that bell that you hear that they ring, you know, that's ringing, if you're listening to Bloomberg or something like that, you'll hear that many times in the back. You know, there's no bell that you see. There's a button, and you can see our chairman has his finger on this button. And that button, you know, they instruct you. They say, okay, when the clock exactly hits here, you hit the button. The fact of the matter is, because Kathy, who was the president at the time, and that's the president of the New York Stock Exchange, just behind me in that picture, he pulled me aside and he said, listen, it doesn't really matter. Like, if you don't hit the button, it's all automatic. Like, and if you decide you just want to screw around and like hit the button, and it doesn't really matter. So I just love this picture of our chairman. He's just so intently watching this big clock, and he wants to do it just right. Now, me with the gavel, that's the important thing, because that's for real. When I have to be perfect, and I have to stop trading exactly on time. But the button, I just got a big kick out of. They give you these instructions like hit this exactly then, and then you hold it only for, you have to hold it for 30 seconds. It's like there's a second hand that sweeps, and you have to hold it for exactly 30 seconds and then release it. And I said, well, what happens if you, A, don't hit it on time, or you just start to screw around, or you freeze and you just keep the bell ringing? He said, actually, nothing you do on that button matters. It's all controlled by somebody else. But what happens, you know what happens, is the traders on the floor will boo you. If you're off, if it doesn't, and this is probably why it's all automatic, so that nobody boos. But supposedly in the old days, that if you missed the time, or if you went too long, they would boo you. So anyway, thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, so you emphasize staying in the core products, but when you went through emerging markets, I couldn't help but think about football, business country, from high school to college to professional, huge market, and with safety these days with head injuries, is MSA at all looking at that market?
At the football helmet market in particular, we did look at it, and we aren't getting into that area. Interestingly, there are no U.S.-based helmet companies left. Plaintiffs' attorneys have done a great job of eliminating U.S. companies from being in that business. Motorcycle helmets the same way. There are no U.S.-based motorcycle helmet companies either. When we made that one acquisition to get into fire helmets, European fire helmets, they actually had a contract underway with Bombardier for a new snowmobile helmet. And so we completed that contract, and it was for Ski-Doo, Bombardier. And so we developed this new helmet for the snowmobile market. And our risk managers came to us and said, Bill, you have to realize that our deductible on an incident is $5 million. So $5 million out of pocket is what we're going to pay. I said, okay, I mean, it's always been that way. That's fine. He said, but you also have to realize that every year in the U.S., 200 snowmobilers put themselves into a fence post or into a tree, drinking alcohol, and end up with a life-changing brain damage, life-changing head injury. I said, okay. And he said, so we're probably not going to take any of those all the way to trial. So if we settle for roughly $4 or $5 million per times 200 times, how many years do you want to be in this, Bill? You know, and you do the math pretty quickly, and you say you can't do it. And so other companies are in that space, and I guess that they feel more protected. I'm not sure how they handle it. I've never really pursued it all that far, but I guess that international companies feel more protected, and it's more difficult to get to them than it would be to get to a U.S.-based company. So we completed the development. To tell you the rest of the story, completed the development, went to Bombardier and say, here's your helmet. It passes all the requirements. It meets everything that we said we was going to meet. We said it was going to meet, but we're not making them. We're not making the production contract. We're going to have to sell that off to somebody else. And we did. We ended up selling it off to an Italian company who manufactures the helmets for Bombardier for the Ski-Doo snowmobiles.
Okay, I believe that's all the time that we have. So please join me in thanking Mr. Lambert for being here today.
Thanks for